I'm going to be calling the Jobs Committee, the Jobs and Economic Development Policy, Finance and Policy Committee to order. We have two bills on the agenda today. We have House File 763 and House File 92. They're both minimum wage changes to the minimum wage law. Both have testimony in multiple committees multiple times. My poor CA has been inundated with phone calls of people wanting to testify, and I told them that we've got about 2 hours and 15 minutes now. So each bill will take about an hour, and then we are going to be laying House File 763 over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill, and the motion for House File 92 will be to move it to Commerce. So with that, I would ask that the author of the bill move his bill for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So moved, and I would like to request that House File 763 be considered for possible inclusion in our Jobs and Economic Development Omnibus Bill.
Why don't you proceed? I see you have one of the testifiers there with you. Go right ahead, or at least someone to explain the bill if you get in trouble.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, members, what this bill does is deals with a lot of federal conformity. We have a few key items that I'll go over here, and for starters, we're basically in federal law right now. There's a 12-week period for maternity leave. In Minnesota, the current law is 6 weeks, and we would like to increase that and conform with our federal standards.
Is that paid or unpaid?
Weeks. Unpaid, and with the same requirements, having to be employed at those places for a certain amount of time, and so that's one of the changes. We're also going to be working with our overtime, and right now there is 48 hours for hourly employees before they are allowed to receive overtime, and this would also conform with federal law, which states every hour after 40 would be applicable to overtime. And then we are also going to be dealing with the actual number with an amendment in the bill, and basically we're going to be tying or increasing from $7.25 to $8.50 and tying that to inflation. So I believe there's a copy of that available for all of you. And the other basics on here would be we'll have our air carrier employees, which will also be subject to the 40 hours, and that's the bill in a nutshell. So.
Thank you, Representative Metsa. You have a testifier there, Ms. Lomer. Could you? Is there anything that you think should be added? Because I know I have had more than a half an hour, 45-minute long conversation, and he only took 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. My name is Jessica Lumen. I'm the Assistant Commissioner at the Department of Labor and Industry, and I oversee, among some other programs, the Labor Standards Division. In labor standards, we have a responsibility for investigating and enforcing the labor laws that we're addressing today. And this particular bill, introduced by Representative Metsa, really does the three things that he articulated. And the reasons that we need to do these things are because we think at the department that by creating more clarity and making it easier for both employers and employees to understand what the expectations are under Minnesota law will help increase compliance with those laws. At the Department of Labor and Industry, we're really about helping employers do it right. We're not about catching employers that are doing it wrong, and only as a last resort. We really are a compliance-based model. And as I was sharing with some other folks here, even in our enforcement efforts, we first provide notice to the employer and say, hey, there's a possible violation here, let's fix it, before we even get to a compliance order, let alone down the road to penalties. So this is really about outreach and education and providing a clear understanding for all workers and their employers as to what the expectations under law are. And we have found that because there are many differences between the federal law and the state law as they apply to, particularly to overtime, and also in some ways to the four-tiered system that we currently have for minimum wage, we have found that there is some confusion among workers and employers, and we're hoping that this bill can help bring some clarity to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bowen. There are 6 people scheduled to testify. Well, I'm wondering, do they want to testify in opposition to this bill? They're listed under Winkler's bill, and there's about 4 in support. So if there's anyone that would like to testify in opposition to Representative Metsa's bill. All right, then. Anyone that would like to testify?
Well, Mr. Chair, did we move this?
We have not.
Okay.
We have not.
I'd like to speak to you.
Yeah. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of Representative Metsa's bill? Anyone that would like to speak in favor of Representative Metsa's bill? So, at this time, there doesn't seem to be any opposition to your bill. Which is...
Should we move my amendment?
Yes.
Well, we can talk about your amendment.
I've actually got a few other, in my fact-finding, if I can let the group know. Do we have time to elaborate a little bit on
I
these things?
scheduled an hour for you. It looks like we're getting done with it in about 10 minutes.
Oh, good. Well, in my research on this, with my intern Joseph, who's working from up in the Hibbing area helping me out, we had a fun project going and learning a little bit more about our minimum wage, both on the state and federal level. And we found that, 19 states right now do have a minimum wage over 7 1/4. And I understand some of this might be duplicative if you were listening to Representative Winkler's testimony through the course of the last week. But I didn't get to say it yet. So 22 states also do have a minimum wage equal to the federal minimum wage of $7.25. 4 states, including Minnesota, have a minimum wage lower than the federal at $7.25, and 4 states have no minimum wage requirements. And right now, 34 states and territories require overtime pay for any hours worked over 40. So I'd say we're in the minority there, and it's another reason for us to make it a little easier for ourselves and go with the federal law. And Kansas is at 46 hours, and Minnesota's at the highest at 48. So, and all states that share a border with Minnesota also have a federal have the federal minimum wage as their own. So North Dakota, Wisconsin, and Michigan also all require that overtime be paid after 40 hours. And so far, 9 states have a minimum wage of over $8. So, right now, too, nationwide, I think it's important for all of us to know that 71% of the people who elect us to these offices are in support of a minimum wage increase in some way, shape, or form to the $9 mark. So other than that, those are a few of the fun fact-finding things that I got to do while researching this legislation.
Well, I guess we will move your amendment. Where is it here? Is that the A13 amendment?
That's correct.
So would you like to move your A13 amendment?
Yes, I would like to move my A13 amendment to be included.
All right. Is there any Are there any questions about the 813 amendment?
Mr. Chair?
Representative Kiefer.
Thank you. As I understand it, this is a department bill for federal conformity, and federal conformity would mean 725, not 850. So just to make it clear, get it on the record, make sure we're messaging people, this is not federal conformity. Thank you.
Would you like to explain your amendment then?
So
I didn't think that was a question, that was a
yeah, it was
commentary.
more of a, can I answer it like it was a question? So Representative Kiefer, in my opinion, I believe that it need to be a little higher, and I understand that this is one item in the bill that is not conforming to federal law exactly, but it is conforming in the essence of we are meeting that $7.25 mark. Exceeding it.
Your previous testifier, could she come back down? Because I have a couple of questions about this, and we'll hold off on the amendment for a little bit because I have a question that concerns the department. You had spoken a little earlier about looking for compliance, not punitive actions on that. And you spoke to at one point, and I would like you to share that with the committee, one of the problems that happens when small employers get confused about which particular place they're supposed to be. If you could.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So as the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry, we have a 3-member staff that performs investigations on labor standards issues. And those are everything from minimum wage to overtime to child labor to all of those kinds of things. We also field about 20,000 phone calls every year related to wage and hour issues. And so from our perspective, as a regulatory matter, it is important to have both clarity and understanding as to what the expectations are in the workplace so that we can ensure that those happen the vast majority of time, and that is what we find. Last year we conducted about 400 investigations with that staff, and we recovered almost $400,000 in back wages for workers who were not paid properly by their employer. That is not including any penalties. That's not including any damages of any kind. We're just trying to get workers the money that they were supposed to get in the first place. And a lot of times we're able to remedy those situations more quickly because once the employers understand what the expectations are, they're more easily able to comply with those expectations. When we talk about creating a single minimum wage rate in Minnesota, which is what this bill does for us, which is what the 763 bill does, it eliminates the small and the large, and it also brings us to at least, if not over, the federal minimum wage, which is what that does is it means you don't stack wages on top of each other and have to figure out where in the threshold of annual revenues you fit in order to know what the appropriate wage rate is.
Thank you. Was there a question? No. Okay.
There are some questions. Can I?
Sure.
Just clarification.
I did not see, I was not watching the hand, so Representative Leiter,
Thank you.
had some questions?
Just for clarification, make sure we get this right. So no longer in this bill do we take into consideration the total revenue that a company makes? It's a flat rate no matter what. And does the amendment then bring it to 850 in fact? Instead of 725?
Representative Metsa.
Yes, it does bring it to 850 instead of 725. It passed.
Was there another question?
No, I mean, I'm going to vote against it. It's because of that.
That's part of our deal here. We get to do that. Representative Yukon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Metsa, also in this bill you have provision for maternity leave in this, and my question to you is, Representative Khan presented a bill before us here, and her bill says, I believe, anytime during pregnancy you'd have paternity leave. Your bill here states some of that too. If I'm adding the figures up right, I'm coming up with 36 weeks of pregnancy leave if both of these bills passed. Is that correct?
Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Uglum, I don't think that it would be correct. I believe, in my bill at least, I would have to defer to Representative Khan with hers, but my bill, it conforms with the federal maternity leave standards that were set, and it would just increase it 6 weeks.
So specifically, this would not be in addition to any other federal. So this would be standalone?
This would run concurrently with that bill.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't stand alone.
Thank you.
Andrea's next. Andrea has a question.
Who was first?
I was behind you. Go ahead.
Representative Keith.
Thank you. To the department, did Dolly do any stats? Were you influencing this 850 number? Where is this coming from? Is there any data to dismiss the argument that this could potentially lose jobs, especially in rural areas where this is a really big jump in the minimum wage in some of those businesses? I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference where I live, and we'll talk about tip credit in another discussion, but, Dolly must have some stats. You guys probably did a little research. Where did you come up with the 850? And do you have any indication that this will not cause any job losses? Thank you.
Which one would like to take that?
Mr. Chairman, the question was directed to me, but I'm going to defer to the author because it's an author's amendment.
In my opinion, with Mr. Chair, Representative Kiefer, in my opinion, with 71% of the people favoring a minimum wage increase, I decided to add an amendment to the bill to bring it up to what I believed a better course of action for our minimum wage. So in times where we aren't dealing with this, that we do have a link to the inflation that allows it to kind of take care of itself, so to speak.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Metsa, so where did you come up with this number? Did you just pull it out of thin air? Do you have some data to support this number is the right one for the correct balance? Because even at our federal level and what the department asked for was 725. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Kiefer. The reason that they were, in my opinion, asking for 725 was to conform with the federal standards. And it's my understanding that right now, also on a federal level, our president is pushing for around $9, maybe a little bit more for minimum wage. And, I kind of jumped the gun, so to speak, and figured something was going to pass on a federal level and bump the number.
Thank you.
Representative Wilmer, did you have a question?
Just a quick question. You just mentioned, Representative Metsa, that 71% of the people want this. Where are you getting that number? Where is that study coming from?
I could get you the specific study. I don't have that referenced right now, but I would be happy to share that with the group.
Thank you. I'd appreciate it.
Representative Eichelton?
I just have a couple questions I need clarified. First of all, are we on the bill, or have we approached the amendment yet, or are we just talking about the bill and getting some information on that right now?
The amendment has been moved.
It has been moved.
It's been a little free-ranging.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So I just have a couple questions for Representative Metsa.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Representative Metsa, kind of on the back of the 850 discussion, when I look at the various options, and I've seen several minimum wage bills come out now as high as 1055, as low as 725. My experience in my district has been pretty varying, but I know that a ton of folks that I talk to find themselves in a situation where not being able to live on the current minimum wage is a real problem. And so how do we fix that problem? And that's a real question that I think we're here to tackle. And I like that you're putting a number out there, and I know that you're also, we've talked offline where you've talked about how we anticipate there'll be some changes as we negotiate that. That's part of what the committee process is. But if you had to give me just your opinion and experience you've had on the range, and I'm trying to compare it to mine, if you were to write this and where we want to fall at on a minimum wage, is 850 the fair range, or do you think that there is some room in there to either move one way or the other, and how would you look at that?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Isaacson. I am a co-author on Representative Winkler's bill. So if that answers your question there, I think the standards that Ryan is going for are very good in his bill. So.
And
Follow-up?
yes, please. If we were to talk about the merits, and I see the two different bills that are kind of going through, but it looks like they're doing slightly different things. When I look at the minimum wage bill, and I'm not sure where I'm falling, but I think it's between where you're at and where Winkler's at, I feel like part of what we're trying to accomplish here as a goal is to make sure that these people have what they need to just survive, and in some ways what that does is it helps them come off a lot of the social programs that we have and other things, so it becomes less of a burden to the state. Can you speak to that at all, or what your thoughts are?
Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Isaacson, in Labor Committee, I believe, I don't remember the exact person who had stated the living wage number, but the living wage in Minnesota, I believe, is at $14.03. And if anyone here knows differently, please feel free to correct me. But I believe that's what I saw coming through in the testimony that was delivered on the minimum wage bills for Representative Winkler's stop there. And, I see this as moving a good way from where we're at now to getting to that living wage level without, telling every business in Minnesota they need to pay a living wage. So,
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Representative Ward, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Metsa. And I'm sorry I'm late, Mr. Chair. I had constituents until now.
The
Representative
arts
Metsa,
are all over today.
they are. They are. Representative Metsa, or Commissioner Ullman, and maybe you've already addressed this in your presentation testimony already, and if you have, just tell me so, please. I apologize again for being late. Commissioner, is there any data that shows the effectiveness of impact locally on the economy for an increase in minimum wage?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, there is lots of data, and I know that many of you have heard a lot of the different pieces of this, and some of it is conflicting, which is typically the way that data works in our experience. But what from the department's perspective, and again I'll then defer to Representative Metsa, but from a department's perspective, and this is also to provide clarity, that the minimum wage that applies to a worker is going to be the highest minimum wage that's otherwise applicable. So when we start at $7.25, that's because that's where the federal wage rate is right now, and that is applicable to most workers in the state of Minnesota. We know that about 93,000 workers in Minnesota are making $7.25 or less. And so since that wage rate applies to many of the Minnesota workers already, from a clarity standpoint, it's important to have that be the base wage for everyone, so that as the starting point. In the event the state of Minnesota decides to raise the minimum wage rate above the $7.25, that would then be applicable to all Minnesota workers, the same as the $7.25 would be if that's the number that you all end up at. So again, just to be clear, the number that is the highest is the one that's going to apply to the workers in Minnesota, And we think that there should be, at the department, we think that there should be one number, one rate for workers in Minnesota for clarity and consistency. That doesn't directly answer your question as to what the impact is. And that was a point of clarification. What the impact is there are a lot of studies that say that the minimum wage really is the wage rate that upon which you can base your community wage. And maybe I'll even actually defer to you on the rest of that question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Representative Ward, I really feel Paul Wellstone, our late senator, said it best. We all do better when we all do better. And the reason I'm using that quote right now is because I live in an area that's been through economic hardship, much like yours, for many of the same reasons, depending on the periods of time we look at. And right now, I've got a lot of friends who are younger. I'm 32 years old. I'm fortunate to have a good state job and also another job outside this that I'm on leave from right now. But for those friends who aren't sharing that same employment that I am, getting them up a little bit to a level that right now, if we look comparatively at the rent costs in my area and the district I represent, the city of Virginia in specific, has pretty comparative rental costs to the rest of the state, and including down here in the metro. And I can tell you we aren't making what people have the opportunity to make here in the wide variety of industries that are available to work in this area comparative to my area. And for me, this is bringing it up a little bit so those people have the opportunity to pay their bills, put food on the table. And I think it's a reasonable step in the right direction.
there's been a testifier that wanted to speak against this, and he should come down against this amendment, but I will ask Ms. Lumen, has your boss given any indication that he likes the 725, or did he have another number in mind?
Mr. Chairman, my boss is the commissioner, and my boss's boss is the governor. And so, just
pick whichever one you want.
Can I pick whichever one I want? Again, I think the governor's made clear even yesterday that he would be comfortable with a number between $9 and $9.50 an hour, and is comfortable with the concept of an inflationary index, and that's the indication that we've been given.
So, Representative Metsa, why are you being so prudent?
I'm open for suggestions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I had a couple other.
Go right ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I would never suggest that, Mr. Chair, that you jumped in on me, but you kind of jumped in on me.
I did, and I apologize.
So, Representative Metsa, can you tell me then, and Mr. Chair actually, said, why are you being so, what does your suggested rate come up with an annual earnings for a person? Do you have any data on that?
I did the amendment late. I would be happy to gather that information for the committee and distribute it. I just looked at the two bills that were out and, a lot of different states' information. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Representative Ward, thank you. Getting used to this testifying. I would be happy to get that information and share it with the committee.
And then one more, just one.
Right ahead.
Representative Metsa, I just had, last Saturday, I had 4 town hall meetings. I was joined with my state senator, my state house rep, and Congressman Nolan Stafford, former Representative Al Doty. And at one of our town halls, there was a resort owner there, a resort manager owner that ran the resort, a very nice resort that we all hope you come to up in our area. It's on Gull Lake. It's a beautiful resort. And part of the thing that really he gave, very good testimony or feedback about, that he was in support of a minimum wage increase. He was not. He said it's been held down too long. He was not opposed to that. And I would say he's conservative leaning, and as a matter of fact, he indicated that himself. I'm not saying that anything that he did not indicate. but he said that he's strongly in support of some kind of increase, but he didn't know, where. He thought that the Representative Winkler's bill was too much at 1055, and, so I just wanted to make that comment and that statement that, from my constituency, from my folks on both sides of the aisle, and that I have not heard that, a lot of people are saying, you know what, we do need to dialogue and maybe adjust the minimum wage. The right number is going to be, and the right pieces are what's going to be critical. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you, Representative Borden. Mr. Chair, do you mind if I comment on that as well?
Go right ahead.
My family owns a small resort up on Pelican Lake in Orr, and I've had many discussions with them about minimum wage. We also own a small coffee shop in Cook, and the longest continuous running movie theater in the state, the Comet Theater. If you're ever up, swing in and patronize us with a cup of coffee, please. Other than that, it was a tough discussion because you're talking about, real small-town people who are going to be paying other small-town people or bigger businesses for that matter. I'm using small-town because it's where I'm from. And these changes, they feel, need to be there too. And so I had the same expressed interest in increasing the wage rates for, our area, the whole state as a whole. Where that, perfect number is, I wouldn't want to argue with the governor and say he's too far off from where I think it should be. And I think, looking at our federal legislators and our president shooting around that same target, there must be some data, and I would perceive that all those people are probably smarter than me and surrounded with smarter people than me helping make those decisions. And I think that there's probably some data out there that shows that, this is a good target for us to be at around that 9 to 950 mark. So,
Representative Leidiger, do you have a question?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Metsa, in your introduction, you talked, and I didn't write it all down, but we compare ourselves to what other states are doing. So I didn't write it all down, but have we done a study on the unemployment rates in the other states that may have a higher minimum wage than this state does? That's my first question.
Mr. Chair, Representative Leidiger, I don't think Minnesota has the resources to study other states' unemployment. I'm sure, that's information you'd be interested in gathering. We could look at the information they've gathered for their own state and compare it to ours, and would be happy to get that for the group.
And Representative Metsa and Representative Leidiger, I sat in on some of the earlier testimony in Representative Johnston's committee, and I know that there were a couple of graphs that they put that to. So I know that information is out there, and we'll bring it with today.
Can I?
Brazil, did you have another?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry.
Of course, my commentary there is that I hope by increasing this, especially up to what the amendment wants to do, that we're not trying to have the same unemployment rate as some of these other states that have a very high minimum wage, because I have this feeling that they run parallel. We have a low unemployment rate in this state, so I hope we're not trying to catch up to the other states. But that's just a comment. The other question I have is, and you were on that line of questioning, trying to get an official position by the department. And can I drill down and ask that question one more time? What's your official position on what that figure should be?
Representative Leidiger, just so you know, she's a lawyer.
She'll do better.
Talk around it, but you can answer it.
I'll ask that again.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Leidiger, I do work for the administration, and the department is very clear in terms of when we put this bill together, because we were trying to achieve, again, simplicity and understanding, and allowing there to be, instead of the 4-tier wage rate, allowing there to be a single minimum wage for the state of Minnesota for all workers, that we were looking at it should be at least the $7.25 that is the federal minimum wage rate currently, with the understanding and expectation that that might not be the number that both the legislature and ultimately the governor recognize is the right number for Minnesota.
And Representative Leiter, just to tell you, Representative Metsa and I were going around and around, and when he put his amendment together and I saw the time frame on it, I kind of kicked myself because I wanted it at 9:50.
Oh,
So just so you know where we were.
I had a feeling that's where you were. Yeah, but my last question, though, would be this. Is this, with this amendment, then, is this still going to be Eli's bill? The department's bill?
Mr. Chairman, this bill does have the pieces in it that the department recommends for the state of Minnesota moving forward.
Thank you.
We're going to try and get done with this bill in about 15 minutes, and I have Purcell, Buglen, Clark, Fabian, Isaacson. So,
Mr. Chair, could I take 1 second to respond to Representative Leidiger's?
how about a minute or less?
Real quick, I can't remember, and I'll get you the data, whether, I think it was San Francisco has the highest minimum wage, and they have also the lowest rate of unemployment. So I think, again, it's all in what data we're looking at and who it comes from.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, over here, to your left. There we go. I actually have data on that, and it shows there isn't a significant relationship because California has a high minimum wage and high unemployment, but many of the states in the South have no minimum wage requirements and the highest unemployment. So you're going to find that to draw a correlation between those two has too many other factors or variables that play into it to say that those two are necessarily related in a significant, statistically significant way. Just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Isaacson, and I'm sure we'll be able to have all that data for a floor debate that could stretch out for a while.
I'm so excited.
Including homeless information.
So were you done? I think you were. Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Metsa and Ms. Lumen, just a couple of questions. I'll try and be quick. I'm just trying to get some perspective on this. And I'm going to start back at that 1403 you talked about. That's a living wage, and I don't know if that's specific to Minnesota. If you said that, but
Yes, I believe.
Thank you. And I just run a few numbers, and so you got $22.40 a gross, and you take the taxes and everything out of that, and somebody's taking home about $1,500 or something. So a month. So does that include, when we consider a living wage like that, does that include things like, if there's a two-parent family and they got kids and they're, they got child care, things like that are going on, and there's going to be a house payment and likely a car payment. And are all of those things factored into that? Because I'm trying to get my head around how you get that out of $1,500 take home a month. That's where I'm coming from. And then we're talking about half of that as a minimum wage, 7 1/4 or whatever, and you're bumping it up. So that's where I'm just trying to get my head around that. Now, some of us used to work in the military, and we were eligible for food stamps when we were doing it too, and I think you were, Representative Leidiger. This was 40 years ago, mind you, but so we know what it's like to live on a little bit, mainly sea rations. But I'm trying to figure out what's taken into account when they do that living wage, so I can understand better this minimum wage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Purcell. I think that the Jobs Now Coalition would have probably some better information as to how they derive these numbers, but we do have the living wage calculation for Minnesota, and I'd be happy to share this with you, unless they would like to come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we're limited in time, and I'd be happy to know if it considers the things that I just mentioned. And any other, okay.
I don't believe it does. There's, one child, one adult, 2 children. So there's different factors taken in on the chart that I have in front of me, with a lot of variations on both the living wage, the poverty wage, and the minimum wage. So.
And I don't know, I'll defer to the chair on this, but it just, the perspective on it is, you know, I'm talking about $1,500 a month take home, and for all of those things, and we're talking about half of that. I mean,
Well, Representative Purcell, I share those same concerns, which is why we're starting with an increase somewhere.
I tried to bring down the testifier that did not like the amendment, and I kind of got not quite shouted down, but frowned down by multiple people. We have someone from the chamber that wanted to speak against it. We have the jobs now. I have 5 people on the, no, 6 people that have questions. We've got 10 minutes.
I'll be brief.
Why don't we bring down the chamber and the judge now, and you can have your say on the minimum, the living wage, and then we'll hear from Mr. Gerber, and then we will, if we have any time left, we'll ask a few more questions. Please identify yourself for the tape and proceed.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Chris Jacobs. I'm Executive Director of the Jobs Now Coalition. The 1403 number is for a 2-parent, 2-child family. This is a statewide average number. What's not included in this number, again, 2 parents, 2 kids, what's not included is any vacation, debt repayments, training, restaurant meals. Most of the things that are considered part of a middle-class standard of living are not in these budgets. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Gerber, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ben Gerber. I represent the Chamber of Commerce. I'll be brief because I'm supposed to testify again. We just wanted to register. There's a few other business interests that wanted one person to speak on behalf in opposition to this amendment. Our main concern is the inflation. Beyond just the wage is the inflation adjuster. We think that is bad policy. The reason why we believe that we elect legislators, and I think most of the population does, to have these discussions when it's appropriate, and to put it on autopilot, we don't think is the right thing to do in this state. So thank you very much.
Mr. Gerber, would you care to comment on either one of the two?
I'll take
Then
a stab
otherwise, I'll go back
at
to
the
questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I would just disagree that we don't. I think there's a lot of precedence for a lot of things being on autopilot around here when it comes to formulas and you know, a lot of the things we do on a day-to-day basis. And so I don't think that it's bad to do that. I think that any session we can come back and look at this, you know, regardless of what party's in control, and, you know, tweak it to make it work best for Minnesota. So I think, you know, I would disagree with the Chamber's stance on this.
How about if I add my 2 cents worth after 14 years on the committee? It's kind of like you get, I think, wage scales taking a gradual slope up rather than a huge jump up is probably better, but that's just a philosophical deal, and people have that, the part of the joy of them, the human race, we get to have differences. We have, I'm going to do Ugam and Clark, and if we have any time left, we'll get to Fabian. So, Representative Ugam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try and be brief, but I do share your concerns, too, about inflation and wage rates. Actually, my question might be for Ms. Lumen. You know, with this inflation amendment here and everything else, right now, in today's world, we're looking at very, very low inflation, but those of us that have been around a while understand what runaway inflation can be like during the Carter administration and everything else. Has the department or the author considered any mechanism to adjust for that if that indeed happens, and history does have a tendency to replay itself? This could be disastrous in terms of what business would have to adjust to if we achieved inflation rates of what we have seen in the past, 15, 17, 20%. Has there been any thought to some type of mechanism to put the brakes on that?
Mr. Chair, Representative Uglum, yes, I did think about that, and I believe we as elected officials are that mechanism, and if we have rampant inflation taking place, I'm sure we'll be working together on a variety of other issues to help get that under control, and at that point we could deal with situations if this were looking as a contributing factor, something that could be adjusted, that we could do that at that time.
Mr. Chair, just one quick comment. I'm afraid that government works a little too slow for that sometimes, and it might be too late. Thank you.
Ms. Lumen, did the department ever look at anything like that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we've actually reached out to the other states that do this kind of an inflationary adjustment, and from a sort of a mechanics standpoint, and the feedback that we've received from them is that it's been relatively easy for them to both implement and regulate the inflationary increases.
Representative Clark, did you have a question?
Hey, Mr. Chair, I'll be kind of brief because I think there's been some discussion of this, but I think the question came up about what a living wage was. And just one thing I can tell you as a person who's spent a lot of time looking at housing issues. Several years ago, some of the folks who have been working on this legislation looked at what it would take for someone in my district, what kind of wage it would take to be able to afford just an apartment, like a two-bedroom apartment. And things have only gotten more expensive, but at that time it was like the wage would have to be $17.25 an hour to pay for the housing if we spent about 30% of the income on housing. So living wage is calculated by a number of different things, but housing is one part of it. And just maybe someone else brought this forward, I'm not sure, but I think my calculations of $8.25 an hour, you're going to end up with about $17,680 as a full-time yearly wage if they're working full-time. And the wage I mentioned for $17.25 would be roughly twice that. So we're very modest in terms of looking at this wage and what people's real needs are in terms of their expenses.
Thank you, Representative Clark. Representative Fabian, did you have a question about the amendment, or could we just deal with the amendment and get that, at least the bill in the shape that the author wanted? Okay. Members, all those, we've been talking about the 813 amendment. I will move would you renew your motion for the 813 amendment?
So moved.
All those in favor of the 813 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
No.
You have the bill the way you would like it. Representative Fabian, you're going to be the last questioner, and then we'll lay this over and hopefully find Representative Winkler. There he is, right over there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, obviously, I think we'll be able to continue this discussion with the next bill as it comes forward. But living where I live, I had the opportunity. I'd like to pick up on where Representative Purcell was when he talked about the families and so forth. Do we have any statistics? This would be for, excuse me, Assistant Commissioner Lumen. Do we have statistics on what percentage of families in Minnesota have two workers, husband, wife, and they both work for minimum wage?
Ms. Lumen.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't have those statistics with me, but we can certainly look for them.
Thank you. And if I may,
Representative Fabian.
and then I'd like to follow up on where Representative Ward was talking about, and then also Representative Metsa about the resort industry. Just ironically, within the last week, I've had a number of different resort people from northern Minnesota contact me in various ways, and one of the things that we talked about was minimum wage. And in my conversations with them, one of the things that seems to be the people who are going to be victims of this will be particularly young, high school age, maybe just graduated from high school. A number of the resorts in my area hire what they call dock people, dock boys, dock girls, and they help get the launches ready. They clean fish and they do all that stuff. And they basically have told me that a bill like this that goes this far is going to make a lot of those young people unemployed. They're going to find other ways to cover those same things. And sadly, a number of those kids that work on those docks make a really substantial amount of money in tips. A lot of people here have probably been up to Lake of the Woods and have gone out on a launch at one of the resorts, and most people are pretty generous when it comes to taking care of those youngsters. So I'm very concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the farms in my area and the grocery stores. I've had a number of contact with the grocery industry, and I mean, we're raising the minimum wage. We're changing the number of hours for overtime. We've got the inflation factor built in with no way to blink it off except here through the legislative process. I'm concerned about that. I think the only thing that we've been criticized for doing too fast in the last biennium was putting the Timberwolf hunting season on, but we can talk about that another time. Thank you.
Well, Representative Fabian, I think, again, any minimum wage where you have an inflationary clause is fair game for an amendment, and it will be a floor fight, I suspect. And if you make a good argument and have a good idea, we should discuss it in, as the floor and see where it goes. Because I don't disagree that is a concern of mine, and there are multiple ways to do it. I'm not quite sure which way I would go with it, but maybe you'll come up with a great idea for the floor. Having said that, members, I am going to lay House File 763 over for possible inclusion in the Jobs and Economic Development Omnibus Bill. Again, it's not where I want it, maybe not where a lot of people on the committee want, but I hope we end up with a minimum wage bill this year. That's my whole goal. With that, thank you, Representative Metsa and Mr. Lumen, and thank you. If we could have Representative Winkler come to the witness table and have a... Then we've got a full slate of people who want to talk about this bill again. And just so everyone knows, I think there were 50 or 60 phone calls to your office. 61 people that wanted to testify on this bill all over again. So, but we are limiting it to, I think there's 7 on this list, now that I can't find it. I steal it from Taboo. There's 10 people who we've scheduled to testify. So, I will take the pleasure of moving House File 92 to be passed and moved to Commerce. Representative Winkler, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And first, I have to give fair warning that I have a major campaign finance bill up in the Elections Committee at the same hour, which may come up at any time. So I know there's a lot of testimony planned, but I may have to skip out for some of the testimony and present that bill as well, and I'll do my best to be available.
I think we have a couple of members of this committee that are also on your bill, and Representative Metsa has warmed that chair up so well he could probably jump in a heartbeat to cover for you when you had to.
Mr. Chair, it is a little bit uncomfortable, actually. So, members, if you look back in time at the minimum wage in this country and in Minnesota, and go back to 1968 and fast forward, people on the minimum wage are making a lot less in Minnesota than they used to. Depending on how you measure it, workers would be making from $10 to $16 per hour if we adjusted by various measures of inflation or even very modest productivity increases. When Minnesota first put in a statutory minimum wage in 1973, it was $1.80 an hour, and adjusted for inflation, that is $9.38 an hour today. So at $7.50 hitting the federal minimum, Minnesota is substantially below where it once was in providing low-wage workers with some basic wage equality. Also since that time, income inequality has risen sharply in Minnesota, not just in the nation, but in Minnesota as well. And in recent years, the state's median income has actually declined compared to other states. So while we like to pride ourselves as being a state with great opportunity, high incomes, and a good quality of life, we are seeing that eroded as the minimum wage itself erodes. Today, thousands of Minnesota workers work and receive public assistance in the form of child care, MFIP, or basically welfare payments, as well as medical assistance and food stamps. We've got tens of thousands of Minnesotans receiving food stamps while working. And interestingly, the industries in which people are on food stamps and working are overwhelmingly in temp jobs, retail, food service, and home care. Those 4 industries account for the lion's share of people who work and get assistance from the rest of us to make their basic needs, to get their basic needs met. There is a common perception that low-wage workers are young teenagers getting their first job, and they don't stay that way for very long. But if you look broadly at people who make less than $10 an hour in the economy, people whose incomes would go up if we pass House File 92, over 60% of those people are over the age of 25. 80% are high school graduates. 45% of those people have education post-high school. So people making less than $10 an hour, almost half of them have post-high school educations. If we pass this bill, more than 500,000 Minnesotans would receive a raise, and we would begin to grow our economy from the bottom up once more, instead of just looking at growing an economy from the top down. Furthermore, members, the lion's share, in fact, virtually all studies that consider the effect of raising minimum wages on employment conclude that there is essentially no impact on employment overall. There may be in particular instances or particular industries, but the overall impact on employment is zero. So, members, there is really no downside to raising the minimum wage. There's always a lot of concern, there's a lot of argument, there's a lot of worry, and a lot of bluster, frankly, from people who oppose it when we look at raising it. But in the end, people don't lose jobs, people make more money, the economy is better served, and we do a good thing. And finally, members, I'd just like to address the question that I think Representative Fabian asked of Dolly about the number of people who are two parents or both people in the couple are working minimum wage jobs. And I can't give you exact data, but I can tell you that if we raise the minimum wage to $10 an hour, over 20% of those people affected would be parents. Nearly a third of those people are married. The income that is based on the minimum wage accounts for nearly half of the family income in the families that have an earner who are making minimum wage. And among workers who are parents, over half of the family income is generated by the job that is paid by minimum wage. So this really is a wage that supports families and that makes a big difference in the lives of families. So, members, I would ask your support and stand for questions, or, Mr. Chair, I don't know if you just want to go straight to testify.
Representative Winkler, we have 10 testifiers. I think I'm going to call up some of the testifiers, and then we hopefully will be able to come back for questions. On the list here, and I'm going to ask it two coming down at a time. John Schultz and Lillian Linder. Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the tape and begin your testimony.
My name is John Schultz, and you have a rare treat. This is coincidentally by accident. We're both from Lake Elmo. I'm the owner of the Lake Elmo Inn. I'm the owner and the chef. That's where I wear my coat because I work every day. I've been in business for 30 years. I love what I do, and I'm lucky to be in the profession where I can make people feel good. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy the feeling I get that I employ over 130 people. For most of them, this is their livelihood. I care for these employees as my family. I believe I pay better than the average. I employ over 20 employees that have been with me over 15 years for an independent restaurant. Some, the full 30 years, have been with me. I started as a dishwasher in this very restaurant back in the 70s. I have been cooking for over 40 years, and I'm very concerned about the wages, especially for cooks and dishwashers. That's my start. I have a lot of compassion and a lot of heartfelt concern for them. I need to survive, so I can continue to employ my staff. As the owner, I have no problem with a minimum wage increase. Even though you all believe that the restaurant industry is traditionally against this particular movement, I am not one of them. But the way it's written today, I think, is unfair. The back-of-the-house employees work so hard for the money they make, and I would love to give them all an increase. Your proposal wants to increase the minimum wage to all tipped employees. Increase the highest and paid employees doesn't really address your issue. Livable wage to the people. I've just sat here for an hour listening about a livable wage and being fair to people. In my industry, this you want to give to the highest paid employees, which does not allow me, if I end up having this put on me, I am very, very hard pressed to give dishwashers and cooks an increase as well. The people that need it the most. I can tell you, if you put in a tipped employee wage in, my cooks and dishwashers would get a raise tomorrow. No question. You see with this increase, affordable health care, corporate tax implications, still paying tax on equipment in the restaurant industry, which no other industry has to pay tax on, such as a broiler that I put in last summer that I paid $11,000 for so that I can produce a product that's taxable. That's another thing that we have on us that not a lot of other industries do. Property tax increase, liquor tax increase. I wonder when I raise my prices if people will still come out to eat at places like mine. Full service, friendly, great food and beverages, and an enjoyable memory for a fair price. I really worry about the tipping point of whether or not I can remain in business or I'd be better off closing. Beyond popular belief, the restaurant industry is not a bunch of money-hungry owners who don't care and take care of their employees. There's a lot of us hardworking, all-in people like myself who care about his customers and what they have to pay and his employees so they can have a life and support their family. In closing, I hope you can see the facts of both sides of this issue. Not once has this minimum wage that you just had for the last hour has talked about the tipped employees. Not once. And again, I think in agreement, minimum wage should go up. But go up for the people who need it the most. And that's pretty much what I heard all along. But we have to define who needs it the most, especially in my industry. Facts of both sides so that we can go with a minimum wage increase that recognizes the tipped employee wage. It would be nice to see you recognize the back of the house. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Ms. Linder?
Yes, I have to admit, I'm happy to be here with John, because you guys really got my blood pressure going. But anyways, I'm Lillian Linder from Linder's Greenhouses. It's a family-run business. We've been in business for over 100 years. We have approximately 150 year-round employees. We have 900 seasonal employees. And not a one of them right now makes minimum wage. They make more. But if you raise the minimum wage, then we have to adjust accordingly, because the market dictates what we pay our employees. So with and here I'm sitting there figuring based on $7.50, and now I'm hearing $8.50, $9.50, $10. I was thinking for $7.50, it was going to cost us $180,000 for our 900 seasonal employees. Now, we make 80% of our revenue in 10 weeks, so that hence the seasonality of it. Our revenue, we've been in business for 100 years, and of that 100 years, our business has grown for all but the last 5 years. And in the last 5 years, our business has been down 20%. And we've cut everything we can possibly cut except our staff, because like John, we consider our staff like family. And so we haven't cut any staff. We cut all our expenses down to the bone. And when you're talking about an increase of $180,000, and then if I look at Governor Dayton's sales tax proposal, which will cost us another $100,000 for our advertising and everything else that we do, you're talking almost a $300,000 increase in our expenses. And we can't handle that. So what's the next thing? All we can do is cut our labor. And I hate to cut our labor because we base our whole industry or what we do on our service. That's the only way we can compete with the Home Depots and everybody else that's selling the same product as we are. And so while, I'm all for living wages, but you don't take in consideration that one size doesn't fit all. You've got part-time people that aren't using this job as their sole source of income. And so in conclusion, I guess I would just like to say that, raising it as much as you're talking doesn't help anybody when people are going to lose their jobs. And we have no other options. Like I said, in the past 5 years, we've had to cut our expenses because our revenues are down. And so I don't want to cut our employees, but I don't know of any other way to make up that kind of expense. And so in closing, I would just like to say I'm a third generation, and I've got a fourth generation coming up, and I really don't know where they'll make it, because the effort is there, but when the government keeps taking more and more away from us, I don't know how they'll survive in the business that we're in. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Linder. You've got a good customer here.
Thank you.
A regular customer here. I can't get those roses to grow the way I want. Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it. The next two on the list are a Doug Windsor and a Jamie Bufel.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Jamie Poole, President of the Minnesota Grocers Association. We're a state trade association representing the retail food industry for over 115 years. We have over 200 retail members with nearly 1,100 locations statewide. We have manufacturing distributing partners as well. Our members employ over 125,000 union and non-union Minnesotans. What I want to just briefly touch on today is that we have an incredibly unique culture here in Minnesota of the independent business owner. Many of our states, many peers across the states don't have near the independent spirit in the grocery industry that you experience here. They are the cornerstone of the community. That's where you go for coffee, meet and greet. They create jobs, they support the local charities, and they provide a safe and responsible shopping experience. We get calls every day about that little community that loses their grocery store, and they want to know how to bring that back because they didn't realize how pivotal it was in what went on all around them. Grocers employ young people looking for first-time jobs, seniors looking to spend their retirement and get out and socialize, as well as developmentally challenged individuals. A matter of fact, young workers 16 to 24 hold nearly one-third of grocery store jobs. However, this demographic by law cannot work early, they cannot work late, they cannot work on ladders or in freezers and operate paper balers, which we certainly appreciate, but we don't know that it's right to compensate them the same when you're looking at this incredible lift in wage. Based on statistics from Deeds, the highest demographic that is unemployed in our state is that 16 to 18-year-old at nearly 20%. Our concern is that we aren't going to have the opportunity to employ these folks. We are proud of the baggers and the stockers that we have and where those folks have grown up to and what they've become. We take pride in the ability to teach and coach those first-time workers. We operate on incredibly thin profits, about 1%. That's about a penny on a dollar. The increased payroll costs, workers' compensation costs, and additionals would severely affect us already in a challenging marketplace. The formula that's required to maintain a viable business dictates our ability to cost shift. A nearly 40% increase in wage over a 2-year period is not absorbable. The unintended results will be higher food prices, less jobs, and restriction of service. We also have great concern with the inflationary link here. This is horribly problematic, and I have a grocer that will speak to that shortly. We pride ourselves on good jobs, great benefits. We offer sick time, health care. Many of our part-time employees receive the same benefits as our full-time employees. We know Minnesota has one of the highest per capita incomes in the country at $44,560 a year. Part of this success, we believe, can be attributed to the grocery industry. Again, we are very concerned and do ask the committee to be thoughtful in what you are moving forward. With that, I'll close my remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Windsor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Mahoney and members of the committee. I'm Doug Windsor. I'm president of Hague Companies. We own and operate a grocery store in Minnetonka and in Coon Rapids. We also own a few grocery stores in Florida. We've been operating as an independent grocer since 1972. I myself started bagging groceries in 1978 with the company, making $1.90 an hour. I was able to put myself through school and basically made a career out of the grocery industry. As a local grocer, we provide many entry-level jobs as well as supporting our communities. I happen to be former president of the Anoka County Food Shelf for over 12 years. Our company is very involved in both food shelves. We've donated over hundreds of thousands of dollars to local charities. We support our communities. What this bill does to us, taking the $10.55 an hour would be over a $250,000 hit to our company. It's a number that we cannot afford. As I mentioned earlier, we operate grocery stores in Florida as well. They have the minimum wage that is tied to inflation. We bought the company in 2008. I ran some numbers here. In the first quarter of 2010, we had 729 employees. As the two former business owners here said, our employees are like family as well. Unfortunately, it came down to whether we want to stay in business or not. Through attrition, we've taken those employees down from 729 to 566. Unfortunately, we've had to reduce services, trim our hours that were open in our communities, all those just types of things to stay in business. We had a store that we were going to build in a small town. Most of the stores we operate are in rural Florida. We were going to build a grocery store where there was no grocery store. Unfortunately, we had to table that, and it was mainly due to labor costs. So all this combined will greatly affect our ability to maintain our current workforce, not to mention limit our capacity to hire new talent. It will stifle our ability to continue the capital improvement projects, which also provide for jobs in Minnesota. And it will force us to evaluate our cost of goods, placing additional burdens on the families this legislation is intending to assist.
Thank you, Mr. Windsor. Appreciate it. Next on the list is Ken Rockner and Ben Gerber. Welcome to the committee. We'll go with Mr. Rockner first. Seems how Mr. Gerber's already been down once, so. He's been testifying a lot today. It's that kind of a week. I just want everyone to know that we were sitting next to each other testifying semi in favor of the same bill 4 or 5 hours ago.
Chairman Mahoney, members of the committee, I'm here representing the Tavern League and the bowling proprietors. I'm a resident of St. Paul, and I was in the restaurant business all my adult life, one way or another, until 1997. I don't want to be redundant. Much of my speech was the same as the gentleman from Lake Elmo, and that's I'm actually not against a minimum raise, and most of my members aren't, for that matter. I think that some of the degrees that we're talking about going within a 24-month period would probably produce a shock to the system. But I'm here to talk about the back of the house also, and fairness, and what can we do to move up the people that really need it. There's a lot of misinformation going on around the tip credit. Some people are trying to call it the tip penalty right now. What it is it's the recognition by the federal government and 43 states that the people in the front of the house are those that get the direct tips. Sometimes there's some voluntary sharing at that point, but there's no question about who, in this case, in the restaurant terms, is the 1%. It's the servers who end up getting the most money. And, we're all in favor of that. Who wants a server that isn't making a lot of money? Ideally, they'll make $100 an hour. I'm not saying they do, but some make in the area of $40 or $50 an hour. The argument about who's making the most money, though, that's over now. 30 years ago, the IRS made that determination. They put in 2 acts, one of them called TRDA, T-R-D-A, the Tip Reporting Determination Act, and the other being the Tip Reporting Accommodation Compact, I think it is, TRAC. One of them is TRDA, the other one is TRAC. You have those agreements in your packet that I passed out. It's page 3 through 5. In those packets, they show what the government...
Chairman?
Yes.
I think they're coming.
Oh, okay. We don't have them yet.
Oh, sorry. In those packets, you'll see that the IRS requires restaurants to allocate tips, if they're not declared, anywhere from 8 to 14%. The federal minimum is 8, but many people enter what's known as a track agreement with the IRS. If an employee disagrees with the rate that's established for that restaurant or the federal minimum of 8% of gross sales, they have the option of going and appealing and saying, I want an audit. I'm not going to pay that. I don't make that. I'm on 2 national boards to deal with the hospitality industry, and we discuss this type of issue quite often about tips and tip credit. And I'm not aware of a server in the last 30 years that's challenged the IRS and says, no, I don't make 8%. Somebody here might be aware of one, but I'm not aware of it. What is going on right now when we talk about why the back of the house is affected? 2 weekends ago, I'd never been to a Panera, but I went to Panera and I went to a Caribou Coffee, and I discovered that they don't allow tipping there. They will not allow you to put it on a credit card. In the case of Panera, where many of you probably have been and thought you were leaving a tip into the glass jar there, that's actually going to a conservation fund. I think it's, whatever it is, it's a good cause, but it's not going to the employee. So I inquired about what their starting wages were and what they were at after about a year or so, and they're anywhere in the area of starting at $8.10, and some of them are up to $8.60 or $8.70 an hour. So the cumulative effect of what's happened right now is we're driving places away from like the Lake Elmo Inn, and we're driving them into places like Panera, McDonald's, Chipotle. Those are all fine restaurants, fine establishments, but the employees there make less than half of what the people do in a full-service restaurant. Also, one last comment. Some of my members are looking right now, one of them just built a place with the idea that they were going to be fast casual as opposed to table-side service. They have started with wait staff, but it's set up so they don't need to. And a chain in Minnesota is now building, even in other states, they're building to go fast casual without wait service. So I would stand for questions if anybody has any. And thanks for the opportunity to appear before you.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Gerber.
Representative Mahoney, members of the committee, thank you very much. My name is Ben Gerber. I represent the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to start out actually by picking on Representative Winkler. I'm glad that I took my statistics class at the University of Michigan and not Harvard, because I think when you actually look at it and you increase when you increase the size of any population in a statistic, you're going to find the data that you want. If you look at the marital status, so about 734,000 of Minnesota's hourly workers were married, 792,000 unmarried. Workers paid the minimum wage or less comprised 9.5% of unmarried hourly workers as opposed to 2.4% of those who are married. So I think, when you start looking at the data from a 1055 perspective, I think you're going to find that the data shows a lot different. I think Representative Metsa made a good point about being in a small town and having small town business owners paying small town people higher wages. I'm not aware of anything in any Minnesota law that prevents you from paying your employees a higher wage. And I think that's important to remember. We're not here saying that you can't pay your employees a higher wage. I think somebody sent me an article that Costco has, I don't remember exactly what their average wage was, but they make a business decision, and if you look at a Costco versus a Target or a small town store, the business model is extremely different. And so to say that every business model has to comport with this legislatively mandated wage, I think is detrimental to the business environment in our state. And I think it's important to recognize that. I think the next thing that we've heard in some of the other committees, and I'm not going to go into a ton of data, but we've heard that the idea behind this is to lift people out of poverty. And that's a laudable goal, and we support that. The problem is that 60% of the people living at or below the poverty line in this country didn't work last year. So making the wage higher is not going to solve the problem. I think the greatest concern from the Chamber's perspective is the impact on those younger workers, which are the highest percentage of people working at the minimum wage. 117,000 hourly workers were 15 to 19 years old. according to the Department of Labor and Industry Statistics. Among those, 27.4% earn that $7.25 an hour or less. And what we've heard when we went around the state, and actually, I believe it's Dolly that put this out, the hiring difficulties in Minnesota. And one of the things that you hear from employers is that some of our younger, less skilled workers are lacking those soft skills. And those are things that you can't teach in college, and you can't teach, you don't learn in high school. And I think it's important to recognize that these entry-level wages are intended for younger workers. I think it's 2/3 of workers that enter a job at the minimum wage receive an increase in that wage within a year. So that the idea is to get these low-skilled workers. In the Senate, we heard some great testimony that from a restaurant owner that pays the minimum wage to somebody that slices bread for toast in their restaurant. And she actually said, and she's not here to say it, but she talked about how she's giving those people those skills to learn how to deal with the boss, to learn how to deal with other coworkers. I mean, I actually, from my own personal experience, you see that with some of your friends, the people that didn't work all through high school and college, and then they get into the workforce, and they don't have those skills to be able to do that. So we're really putting ourselves at a disadvantage. If you look at our teen unemployment rate, so I think it was brought up, well, what is, California or San Francisco has the lowest unemployment rate out of any city in the nation, but they have the highest wage. But I think, when you compare us actually to states surrounding us, outside of Wisconsin, which has a slightly higher teen unemployment rate in 2011 was 20.4%. South Dakota, North Dakota, and Iowa all have much lower teen unemployment rates. We're the second highest at 19.1%, and Iowa is the lowest at 14.2%. So there's going to be a real disparate impact on some of those younger workers in getting them in the workforce. And I think Mr. Rockler mentioned something that I think we see as well, is that some of those low-wage, low-skill jobs to get people in the workforce are no longer there. So the person that used to bag your groceries, the person that used to check you out at the cash register, you see less and less of those jobs. Pumping gas, those have become automated. And so we're losing those opportunities to get those skilled workers in because we're putting more and more cost mandates on businesses. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. What I'm planning on doing is I'm going to bring down the 4 people in support of the bill, and then we should hopefully have at least 20 or 30 minutes for questions. So on the list is Kelly Johnson and Nicole Hilgendorf. And then on deck is Leah Soho and Brad Leto. Welcome to the committee. Thank you for coming today. Would you identify yourself for the tape and please proceed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and chair members. My name is Nicole Hilgendorf, and I am currently a server in the city of Minneapolis. I have been a server on and off for the past 8 years. I started serving while enrolled in college in Wisconsin. My hourly wage was set at $2.33 an hour. I hardly received a paycheck from my employer, as my hourly earnings were just enough to cover the taxes I had to pay for my tips. Therefore, any income I received was almost entirely dependent on tips from customers. On busy nights, I guess this really didn't affect me much. However, obviously I can't dictate what business is, and we had a lot of slow nights, and it was extremely problematic for me. At the end of the month, if I did not earn enough money to cover my bills and expenses, I was forced to pick up additional shifts, which resulted in missing class, and that happened a lot, breaking plans, or just paying bills late and incurring penalties and fees. After college, I decided to move to Minnesota, and the first job that I was offered was a server position. When I replied to the job posting, I saw that it was $7.25 an hour, and I assumed that that was just a mistake. However, after 2 weeks, I did receive a paycheck. And it was not a voided check or a check for 10 cents. It was an actual paycheck. I can honestly say for the first time while being employed as a server, I felt like a valued employee. Receiving a minimum hourly wage in addition to tips has given me a sense of financial stability. I know that no matter what I make in tips, I will at least earn enough money to cover my monthly rent. That alone has had a tremendous effect on my well-being as some of my financial stress is diminished. Although tipping is culturally enforced, it is subjective and therefore not guaranteed. I understand that federal law states that if a tipped employee does not earn the minimum wage from hourly plus tips, the business is responsible to ensure that the tipped employee receives the minimum wage rate on their paycheck. This would have been very useful information for me to have when I was working in Wisconsin. I unfortunately was unaware of this, and I'm assuming many others in industry are unaware of this as well. I would also like to address a rumor that I often hear that most tipped employees are young people or college students just trying to make ends meet for a short period of time. This is untrue. Even though I do work with college students and young people, I also work with people that have families to support, as well as workers who have been in the industries for years or decades, and this is their career. Tipped employees rarely receive benefits such as health care, 401k, and sick days. Many tipped employees just do not get sick, or rather, they do not get proper health care when they are sick, and they show up to work when sick because they can't afford to take a day off, which will only prolong their ailment, or even worse, they spread it to others. Paying tipped employees minimum wage at least makes the out-of-pocket cost for health care more manageable when ill. I would like to remind you all that, and this has been brought up many times today, that the minimum wage is not a livable wage. Tipped employees are not at all wealthy, nor are they greedy in asking for a fair compensation from an employer. We are just trying to make a living like everyone else. I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to share my experiences with you today.
Thank you for your testimony. Am I saying it right, Hilgendorf?
Yes.
Oh, all right. And Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Kelly Johnson. I'm from down in Stewartville, Minnesota. I'm 41 years old. I've been a server all my life. I love it. I love working with the people. You actually shortened a lot of it because you covered a lot of it. Because of my tips and stuff, which is all claimed, I have not been a burden onto the state. I'm a single mother for the last 12 years. I have not been on welfare. I have worked. Tipping is not a guarantee. It's not an obligation. As a waitress, I will have no problem not leaving a tip if the server is not doing their job or not going over and above what they should be doing. I don't think any of us feel that we should have to. Other states that do have the tip credits also, if you look on a lot of your bills, a friend of mine was just out in California, every one of her restaurant bills that they had an 18% service charge on it. So I don't feel that everybody in everyone in this room should be having to take on the obligation of paying the wages for these people. I'd ask you don't leave servers left behind on this because we pay it and we have taxes as well. I think most of the time when you guys go to a restaurant and you pay for your meal, the majority of it nowadays is on a credit card, which is all 100% claimed. With that increase in minimum wage as well, if you put an extra $50 or more in somebody's pocket, as we've heard like with the business owners and stuff like that, we've heard what it's going to cost them, but I don't think we've also heard what possibilities it has in raising them. If I have an extra $50 in my paycheck every week, I'm going to Walmart Shopko, to Walgreens, to the businesses. I'm going out to eat more often, and I'm going to spend that money instead of just staying home. So yes, there is an increase in their liability, but there's also should be an increase in their business with that extra money that's spent because people can go out and spend that money. I think that's a thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it. We have a question, but I'm going to let the other two testifiers come down, so if you two could stick around for a little bit, appreciate it. Welcome to the committee. Mr. Leto, Ms. Soho. Which one of you would like to go first?
I can go.
Well, please identify yourself for the tape and proceed with your testimony.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Leah Solo, and I'm here representing Service Employees International Union State Council here in Minnesota. We are in favor of raising We are in favor of raising the minimum wage in Minnesota and support H.R. 92. One of our 4 locals here in Minnesota, Local 26, represents janitors, security officers, and window cleaners throughout the metro area and the suburbs. They play an essential role in our community and economy. They clean and protect hospitals and schools. They are men and women of diverse backgrounds with families and community ties and history in our state. They're not college students or high school seniors just trying to make it through to the next phase in their life. Today I ask you to respect their work and the work of many others by supporting a raise in the minimum wage. The average janitor or security officer in the Twin Cities is living below the federal poverty line. The average Local 26 member in the Twin Cities Metro makes $11.77 an hour and works 33.5 hours a week, earning $20,503 a year. Even with the new contracts that we just won, many Local 26 members are still making below the proposed new minimum wage. Starting wages are lower than $10 an hour for some. For janitors to be self-sufficient and to not have to rely on assistance, they need to be making $14.74 an hour for 40 hours a week. What is the dignity when we tell a worker, you will work full-time, but still have to ask for public assistance? 15% of our workers have either already lost their home to foreclosure or are in danger of becoming homeless soon. What is the dignity when we say to someone, you will work full-time, but cannot provide a roof over your house, over your head for your family? Studies show a ripple effect. When you raise wages for some workers in an industry, it can help raise the wages of others. Economists suggest that through a multiplier effect, raises for low-income families will be spent in and around the communities where these families live, pumping more money into the local economy and many impoverished communities. Please stand with the workers that clean and protect our community, hospitals, and children. Please raise the minimum wage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Solo. Mr. Leto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Brad Leto, Chief of Staff for the Minnesota AFL-CIO Labor Federation of more than 1,000 affiliated unions representing more than 300,000 working people throughout the state. And I am here to speak in support of House Bill 92, increasing the minimum wage to $10.55 over 2.5 years. And I want to be clear on that because it's been said that is going up to $10.55, and it almost sounds like immediately. So anyways, I want to let you know that. Well, and some would say maybe we should, but why is labor here? Why is the Minnesota AFL-CIO here for this? Most of our folks certainly make more than that per hour. 5 simple words: economic justice for all workers. Union members and their families care passionately about economic justice for all working people. Eroding wages and benefits have devastated many workers and their families. The economic problems facing them are not purely accidental, nor they are a result of some failure on their own part of the workers that take the initiative to get ahead on their own, and I think you've heard that just recently from 2 servers. They're a result of a specific set of unrestricted free market economic policies, I would say. The last time the minimum wage was raised in Minnesota was 2005, and I just want to highlight that. I'm probably too old and been around here too long. After 27 years, 14 working for the legislature and 13 in the current position, through seeing lots of minimum wage increases, efforts come and go. Every 8 years, on average, the minimum wage is increased in the state of Minnesota. In 2011 alone, the compensation for CEOs or chief executives at American companies grew by 15% in 2011, after a 28% rise in 2010. Workers, on the other hand, have been left behind. Since 1978, CEO pay at American firms have risen 725%. That's more than 127 times faster than worker pay over the same period of time. Raising the minimum wage right now is more important than ever. Minimum wage increases stimulate the economy by increasing consumer spending without adding to the state and federal budget deficits. Consumer spending drives 70% of the economy, and increasing demand is key for jumpstarting production and rehiring. A raise in the minimum wage puts money in the pockets of low-income consumers, as we heard, who immediately spend it at their local businesses. When I hear business say that they'll have to cut labor, I wonder if these businesses realize those people with the extra money, as was mentioned, will spend it in the local economy. They're not going to go to Bermuda. They're not going to take major vacations to the Caribbean. Economists in the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago found that every $1 increase in the minimum wage boosts consumer spending by low-wage workers' household by $2,800 over the following year. Money that goes into the economy. More families never relying on low-wage and minimum wage jobs to make their ends meet. For example, the top 3 occupations and industries that have experienced job growth in 2010 were retail sales, cashiers, and food preparation workers. All occupations with median wages below $10 an hour. This is not a short-term trend. 7 of the top 10 growth occupations projected by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, not my numbers, for the next decade are low-wage jobs. Raising the minimum wage would be a much-needed boost in income for these types of jobs where millions of workers today spend their careers. The best research and real-world experiences minimum wage increases confirms raising the minimum wage does not cause job loss. I can give you, I won't go through all the studies because we can all do studies on both sides, but I can certainly provide these all to you. I will just go quicker to the end. Opponents frequently make the claim that a higher minimum wage would send jobs and businesses fleeing across the state border. The one study I will mention is a 2006 study by the Fiscal Policy Institute, I can provide that, found that states that raised their minimum wages above the federal level had faster small business and overall retail job growth in states where the lower federal minimum wage prevailed. It's also important to remember that since the minimum wage has lost so much value over the last several decades, employers today are actually being paid less in real dollars than they were in 1968 when the purchasing power of the minimum wage was at its highest. Raising wages reduces costly employer turnover and increases productivity. Research has documented how, especially in low-wage industries, raising wages reduces turnover. I could cite a study or two which have been done in the past, and they have been cited in past committee hearings. Rather, I would point you to page 2 of the business section in today's Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Costco supports call to lift minimum wage, and it mentions a few other businesses as well. Costco pays a starting wage of $11.50 per hour and provides health care and other benefits, and is non-union. CEO Craig Jelinek stated, quote, "Instead of minimizing wages, we know it's a lot more profitable in the long term to minimize employee turnover and maximize employee productivity, commitment, and loyalty," unquote. The article further states, analysts have sometimes called on Costco to cut back on benefits or lower wages, but the company has not listened. Such calls on the company have quieted as the stock has continued to grow in value. The stock is now trading over $100 per share. A decade ago, it was $32 per share. In closing, the fact that the minimum wage has fallen to one of the lowest in the country is indeed a sad state of affairs. It's time to further the economy in Minnesota, boost the spending power of thousands of Minnesota workers, and raise the minimum wage over 2.5 years to $10.55, and then index it to inflation. I want to also remember regarding, again, the indexing to inflation, as I said, I've probably been around here too long, it's every 8 years that the legislature has increased the minimum wage. Thank you for your time, and I would be happy to stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leto. I have we have 5 people here, and I do want everyone to realize, I just want to, Representative Gunther came to me and asked as the past chair to present a tip credit bill, and as a courtesy to the past chair, I will let whatever bill he brings forth is going to get a hearing. Whether it meets deadline or not, it will get a hearing. So for all those witnesses here, be prepared for a little while down the road. Representative Gunter will be sitting in that hot chair. So we have Sabian, Metsa, Kiefer, Leininger, Albright, and Estelle.
If we have time, I'd like that.
So, so we've gotten a good number here. So, all the testifiers are here. Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'd like to ask Mr. Windsor and Ms. Lindner to come back down, please, if we could do that. Thank you. I love your passion. Mr. Chair, thank you. If you didn't have such, Ms. Lindner, I was going to say, if you didn't have such a good representative already from Lake Elmo, I'd tell you that there's an election in 2 years. But if I may, and it's kind of ironic, one of the people I talked to in the last couple of days is a grocery store owner up in Roseau and Warroad, and his last name is Lindner. And we talked a little bit about the effects that so much of this stuff is having on his business. He told me yesterday that their net profit in their grocery store, and I was going to ask Mr. Windsor, your profit margin in a grocery store, it's really quite small, is it not? Would you answer with a percentage, please?
Yes, sir, it's less than 2%.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll proceed. Thank you. He told me that because of the new requirements coming from the new health care laws and so forth, they're going to see in their small business a $200,000 increase in or decrease in their revenue, increase in their expenses because of the new health care laws. Are you experiencing similar situation?
Yes, sir, it'll be north of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to give you 4 minutes.
All right, that's good. All right, so Ms. Lindner, would you tell me, one of the previous testifiers talked about how raising the minimum wage will stimulate your economy. Could you repeat for me, please, how the raising the minimum wage is going to stimulate your economy?
Well, like I said, for us, we have so many seasonal and part-time workers, and a lot of our seasonal is in that younger bracket, and just so you know, youngsters do not buy flowers. So, we can increase their minimum or their wage, and like I said, we do not even pay them minimum wage. We're higher than that. And we can pay them all we want, and they're not going to come back and buy flowers. So, to us, it's just a sheer expense.
Thank you. And with that, when you hire those young workers, Ms. Lindner, and you too, Mr. Windsor, are there restrictions placed on them already that they can't do certain jobs because of laws that we have in place in the state? For one thing, I was told that young people can't shovel snow at the grocery store in Roseau. They can't mow the grass out by the parking lot. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Lindner, is that the same in your business? Do you have restrictions on what young workers can do?
There definitely is things that they can't do, correct.
Okay. So, and then my last question, Mr. Chair. When you hire young workers and you start them out at a certain wage, whether it's $6, $7, whatever that is, high school age kids, how long does it take for them to get a 50-cent an hour raise or $1 an hour raise after you get done kind of training them?
For us, it's less than a year.
Same here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have a few comments in response. Again, in our labor testimony, I said I'd be more than happy to pay a few extra, whether it's $1 or a few extra cents on a transaction as a patron of, many of the businesses that would be affected by this, knowing that my neighbors and friends were making a wage that they could go home and pay their rent on. Secondly, I think our focus has been on the servers in this, and I really, for me, it's not why I'm supportive of these bills. It's all the other people that we're not talking about. And I do believe we've been focusing on young people, and to me, this isn't about young people. In the Labor Committee, I talked about women that I pay to make sure we're good to go, and I can drive down to St. Paul every Monday. And she's about 50, 55 years old and has worked, low-income jobs her whole life and is very dependent on it. And every Monday, I get encouraged to keep working on the minimum wage bill. She doesn't make enough to pay her rent, to spend time with her grandkids, and for whatever reasons in life she got to that stage where she was dependent on this income. We can all debate those issues separately on an individual basis, but overall I don't see a problem with raising the bar and making sure that we're providing these incentives. And I would challenge my colleagues who disagree with this. How much in savings do we get on other programs where we are providing subsidies that all of us are paying for equally are offset by the fact that we are increasing the wage, which in an assisted living home, I've been learning a lot in our housing committee with Chairwoman Clark, and I think a lot of these programs would be offset in their costs and be able to expand to more people in need, because these people are paying a percentage of their income in terms of what their actual rent fees would be, and a multitude of other programs that operate in a similar fashion. And as for, so that's kind of my comment there. I'm going to pick on Ben a little bit here. Ben, are you saying that the Minnesota Chamber's committed to hiring and promoting for their businesses to hire more people to pump gas and bag groceries?
Representative Metsa, did you want Mr. Gerber to come to the witness table, or is this one
It's more of a rhetorical question. I'm sure he wouldn't want to answer
I don't think you
too directly.
I don't think you can ask him. I think you could ask the chamber.
I will ask the chamber. But, I don't think that with the wage increases we've had in the past, that some of these jobs weren't going away anyway just because of the way our society is becoming. As a younger person, we're more fast-paced. We're using internet banking, going on and filling out our renewal for our license plate tabs online, and we expect our McDonald's burger when we get through the drive-thru to be in the bag by the time we pull up to the window. And I think that's kind of the difference where we're heading. And there are still some gas stations that have the gas pumpers and everything. Are we getting down to my last 30 seconds? Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure to use it all up.
Closing comment.
My closing comment would be, I just think the argument's wrong that these jobs are being lost because of minimum wage increases. And if we addressed it 8 years ago, I think I would remember seeing a lot more people pumping gas, for sure. And I do see a lot of people still bagging groceries, especially my brothers and sisters with UFCW.
Could I make a comment?
Certainly you can.
I would just like to address, again, if you've got a one-size-fits-all, and a lot of our workers come to us, and they're younger. We also have quite a few retired. And I have a 15-year-old son at home, and when you're talking $9.50, $10 an hour, I don't care what anybody says. He is not worth that much money.
You just said that on tape.
Well, I'll make sure he doesn't watch it. But I think that kind of goes to everybody. I mean, I understand the livable wage, and when you're talking Costco pays $11.50, and like I said, we don't start our people off at minimum wage either. And every business here can start it. The market determines. If I went out there and tried to get somebody at minimum wage, they're going to tell me they can go to McDonald's and make more. So, I mean, and when you're talking about, like I said, $6.25 to $7.50 is 22% increase. When was the last time any of us got a 22% increase? I haven't gotten a raise in over 10 years. Because, we're, as an owner, we got to make sure our employees are taken care of and our job and our business runs.
Mr. Chairman, may I retort a few comments?
Certainly. Go ahead.
Thank you. Representative Metsa, Walmart is a $400 billion corporation, and they built their company strictly on price. I can tell you from a Minnesota company, the very people that you want to protect, the mother with children and our average wage in our store is $17 an hour, plus we pay full benefits, which is about another $4 an hour. So we're close to 21. By increasing the 16-year-old's pay to $10.55, so they can buy $60 more a week in iTunes cards, is going to affect the very people that you want to protect. I saw it in Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. We're going to change witnesses here in a minute, but I will say, Ms. Linder, actually the 8-year span between, that's the problem with minimum wage, is we have to come back every 6 or 8 or 10 years and jump it up a huge amount. It really is a tremendous shock to business. I mean, I'm a labor guy through and through, but I've sat on this committee for 14 years, and a graduated increase on a yearly basis, or as small as it needs to be, or whatever it is just good common sense. I mean, otherwise you're back here and you get nailed with a $2 an hour, and it ends up being $250,000 shock to your system, and that is not that's harder on a company than a $2,500 a year shock. So, but I do understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate you coming there and spending the afternoon with us, so that, and maybe answering some more questions. So let me go to Representative Kiefer. You had a question for one of the servers?
Actually, no, I changed my mind. I'd rather talk.
That's a prerogative of the legislature.
Talk to Mr. Leto and Ms. Soho.
Solo, I think it is.
Solo, sorry.
I was just thinking I wanted to be in New York for a weekend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And either one of you can answer this. I have a couple of questions. One is, which union members of your unions, and maybe it would go more to you, Leah, sorry, I'm just going to, you can call me Andrea. Which ones make the minimum wage, and how does the contract refer to those employees? That's my first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. As I mentioned, some of the starting wages for our janitors are below $10.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Use your 4 minutes, Jack.
What are the monthly dues for the people that maybe like clean the hotels?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information in front of me.
Mr. Chair, I was told by one of the local hotels that a person would pay $40 a month. Of that, if there's a married couple that are both cleaning the hotel, would they both be paying $40 a month in union dues?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay, I believe they do, Mr. Chair. So that's $80 a month that they pay in union dues. If they're really under threat of foreclosure, will they come to the union, and will you reduce their dues to help them make ends meet?
Ms. Solo.
I'm sorry, again, I don't have that information.
Representative Kiefer, I will tell you, in my union, we actually do help our members with that have suffered through foreclosure.
I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I would like to get more information from some of the other folks that work maybe, because I know that your kind of union is very, very different. You're kind of a trades and
we're all
private
brothers and sisters in the labor movement.
Well, I don't think so, and I think that especially in these hotel things, there might be people. We saw witnesses in the other committee where they don't speak English. So we want to make sure that these people are not being taken advantage of by the union and told they have to pay these dues because they're getting all these benefits, and now they're going to bump up an hour and $1.25 an hour. That is not going to make a difference in their life. This is frustrating because minimum wage is not intended to be something that's going to bring you into the middle class. And we're micromanaging. So, just to do the numbers, if they make minimum wage, and you said they work 33 and a half hours a month on average, that's about $41.25 if you take in the increase from Metsa's proposal to $8.50. Now, if you take the $41.25, took off the $40 union dues, plus the additional taxes they're going to have to pay and the extra money they're making, they'd actually come out ahead. Sorry, I'm just... Mr. Chair.
I just love the ability to keep the committee moving forward. If Representative Metsa would like to have a comment, but I actually would like, I'll just let you take 15 seconds.
Real quick, I would just like to say that, thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Kiefer. Would you ask someone's telephone company to do the same thing, or any bill that they're paying to have a service provided to them for those companies to also provide a rebate for the same things you're talking about here?
Mr. Chair? Yes. Actually, they do that. There's a lot of companies that do offer things for, Comcast offers a program for free and reduced lunch children's families for internet for them.
Okay,
but
get back to
we will
follow-up question.
I have one more point, Mr. Chair, because I've heard this bill 3 times.
Yes, I know you have.
I'm on the minimum, minimum wage.
Yep.
Okay. The Dr. Hall a couple weeks ago gave us a chart. We already have a prevailing wage that's an outlier in Minnesota, and I've got it right here. It was in the other committee. We know that there's wage compression when we start to bump up the minimum wage. So I'd like to know what's the plan for prevailing wage here? Do you expect that to go up as well, and will be pushed further out in an outlier? And I can show you the chart. It was passed out in the other committee. Thank you.
Would you like to answer that, or would you like a building trades guys to answer that?
Mr. Chair, Representative Kiefer, I don't believe the minimum wage has ever had anything to do with the prevailing wage. If you would like to make the minimum, and Representative Muller has done years of work on the prevailing wage, but and I will say that that's certainly not our intent in any way, shape, or form. If you would like to tie the minimum wage to the prevailing wage rate, we'd be more than happy to have that.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think coming from a business perspective, and I have some questions for the first couple testifiers. So if Mr. Schultz, Ms. Lindner, Ms. Poole, and Mr. Windsor could approach the testifiers' table, I'd appreciate that. But I think as they do that, I think one of the comments that I would make is that what we're really dealing with from a financial perspective is whose capital is at risk in what we're all talking about. And if you take a look at whose risk to capital we're really talking about, it's the employer, it's the job creators, it's the people that are employing the people who are seeking employment. And I think, I just want to make sure that those individuals are not lost in the conversation. So that's why I bring that up. But my first question, and I have 4, and I'm going to try and use up as Representative Metsa. I got 4 minutes. Okay. My first question is for Mr. Schultz, or
I think he left.
Okay, I'll defer then to Mr. Windsor on this one. And I mean this sincerely. Where's the money going to come from if we raise the minimum wage? Where's it going to come from?
Mr. Windsor.
Well, as we saw in our stores in Florida, unfortunately, we've had to cut the number of employees that we have. I mean, our revenues aren't up. We are increasing more and more competition. Obviously, the economy's had effect on our revenue. Unfortunately, we just have to cut services and honestly cut hours and cut jobs.
Mr. Albright, I represent Albright.
And this is more of an explanation, but working in the employee benefits field and for pensions and whatnot, I'm fully aware that we are mixing metaphors here in terms of a minimum wage, a living wage, and a total benefit package, if you will. And this might question from the grocer's perspective for Ms. Poole. If you add the benefit package, dollar value on an hourly rate to what you're providing your employees with in the whole, as my suggestion is, that might approach $4 or $5 as total benefits. Would that not be the case?
Mr. Chair, Representative, absolutely. We know right now that certainly our grocers across the state are paying anywhere from, it's about $3 to $5 in benefits per employee. Obviously, as minimum wage goes up, it isn't even just the benefits package, but it's the payroll taxes, worker compensation, as many of you know, unless you're self-insured, that's based on your W-2s as well. So there's also unintended costs that are going to escalate for those businesses.
And Ms. Poole, as a follow-up to that, in your estimation from an employee's perspective, is it more appropriate to receive a heightened or enriched health insurance benefit as to opposed to a increase in the minimum wage or wage pursuant to the tax implications of the two?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't know that I could answer that necessarily from an employee standpoint, but I would certainly think, we've got the effects of the ACA coming, as well as what we're going to do with the Minnesota Healthcare Exchange. So I'm sure factoring all of this in, what that quotient will be for the employee right now, I think is also a little hard to tell. So I apologize.
And my point being is that typically a health insurance plan, when it's provided to an employee, is provided on a net, on a pre-tax basis. Whereas if you're raising the wage or the raw wage that they realize, you are setting them up for actually not getting the full measure of that wage because it's going to be applicable to federal and state withholdings, as well as Social Security and any other withholdings that are applicable to that wage. And so I think in the whole, we've got to make a consideration in terms of what is the most applicable, pertinent question to be raised in terms of the total benefit package that people are realizing from being employed by the people that have their capital at risk. And to your point, Mr. Windsor, in terms of if you don't have the money to pay people, that you're going to have to employ fewer people in order to stay in business because it is you and the people that you represent that have their capital at risk. Is that not the case?
That is the case.
Thank you. I just have one follow-up question then for the representatives from the SEIU.
Ms. Solo.
Ms. Solo, you understandably represent some collective bargaining agreements that would be pertinent to this increase in the minimum wage, would you not?
Sorry.
Solo?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
You represent people that would be affected by this minimum rate, minimum wage through collective bargaining agreements that are on the tables currently.
Ms. Solo.
Yes, correct.
And so there's also a cost of living increase that was mentioned in House File 763 that would be representative of an increase in the wages that are applicable to those bargaining agreements. Is that correct as well?
Ms. Solo.
You are, to be clear, you are referring to the escalator?
Yes.
Yes.
So it seems to be a little bit of, you're asking for two things in terms of asking for an increase in the wage plus a cost of living increase. And the reason I bring those up is to your question, and this is the last one I have, is who ultimately is responsible for that individual's standard of living?
Ms. Solo.
My apologies, but I'm not quite sure what you're getting at.
Is it the organization employing them that is responsible for the standard of living for that individual, or under a republic which we live in, is it the individual's responsibility for taking responsibility for their own life and having the opportunity to seek out employment that does provide a living wage?
Ms. Solo. I think Politics 101.
Point of order. I don't believe that question reflects what we're talking about in terms of the fact that, A, it's clearly leading her to try to say something that she doesn't want to say, nor would she probably agree with, nor would I agree with.
Representative, I suspect that Ms. Solo is well enough versed to get out of this particular question as she chooses to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative, could you, or Mr. Chair, Representative, could you please repeat the question?
In your capacity as a representative of a collective bargaining agreement, is it your opinion that the individual is responsible for their own standard of living or the organization that they work for?
The chair would say it's the union, but that's just me.
As a representative of the State Council of SEIU, we work to support our members and be an advocate for them and for their families. And I'll just say that's what we do.
Thank you, Ms. Sola, and Representative Albright.
I have nothing further, sir.
And that's just fine. I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to tell you that as a 30-year member of a union organization, I take a pledge when I joined that union. Each and every member of that union is to be considered as a brother and a sister. And as a brother or a sister, they're in my union or they're in my family of origin. If they are in trouble, it is my responsibility. And it shall always be my responsibility to the pipe fitters, to the building trades, to the AFL-CIO, and to my family. With that, we have a few minutes left. Mr. Representative Ugum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for Mr. Leto. Sir, you discussed a number of studies where you said that the increase in the minimum wage would really result in the individuals going out, spending some more money and stimulating the economy. Was that what you were?
Mr. Chair, Representative Buglin, there is I should have brought my papers back, but I mean, I only mentioned one, I think, study. There's a number of them, and I just cut my testimony down. I didn't go through them all. But there's one, the Federal Reserve in Chicago did an analysis for every $1 increase in the minimum wage. It was $2,800 or $2,500. I should have brought my papers with me, but either $2,500 or $2,800 more into the economy in Chicago. There's other studies, and I can get you the information. There were other studies that are mentioned on a variety of topics, job loss, based on counties, border. There was a major study in 2010 done by counties on borders as far as job loss and there wasn't. There was unemployment rates. I mean, we're looked at. Anyways, I won't go further, but I can certainly get you those.
Mr. Chair? That's all right. But your study basically, part of that study was talking about the stimulus to the economy with the increased wages.
Right.
Now, Mr. Leal, we have heard numerous businesses testify that they're going to have to raise prices to take care of these increased wages. Now, would you say that raising prices is inflationary?
Mr. Leto.
Mr. Chair, Representative, raising prices could be the necessity of a business decision. I mean, I
don't know, but is it inflationary when your prices go up?
I guess I don't know. I mean, I would say could be, but not necessarily. I mean, there are business decisions that are made every day. I've certainly seen, if you look at other states with minimum wages higher, which is most of the states actually, minimum wage is higher. I mean, I don't think you could say they're all lower priced for their goods and services than states that have higher minimum wage. I've been in the state of, my brother lives in the state of Washington, and Washington, Oregon on the border, and if you look at prices between the two states and various things, I mean, you can have, without sales tax considerations, there's a lot of other considerations. They both index the minimum wage and have two of the highest minimum wages in the country.
Mr. Chair, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking when businesses raise prices, which they're going to, we've heard testimony about that they will raise prices. When businesses raise prices, I think general economic theory holds that that's inflationary.
All I can say, Mr. Chair and Representative, is in past all of the past minimum wage increases, and I will say, and I understand it's new people, new faces, everything else that are testifying. Every argument that's been made here has been made in every minimum wage increase debate that I have ever observed or been a part of, and it seems to me that businesses have done well here, and in fact, the hospitality industry has done better here than most states.
Mr. Chair?
I actually have to, we have 4 other people that want to testify.
Let me finish it out. 2 seconds.
Okay, quick, very quick.
All right. Well, my point here is, quite simply, that in the short term, the increase in the minimum wage will stimulate the economy. But in the long term, once businesses raise prices, you're going to erode the buying power of the very, very people that you are trying to uplift. And inflation does erode buying power, period, plain and simple. So a massive increase in the minimum wage is going to be inflationary. Short term, it's going to create jobs, or it creates stimulus to the economy. But long term, you're going to erode the purchasing power. You're going to be right back where you started from. Thank you.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comment, and then I have a question for Mr. Gerber, if he's still here. My comment is, and Representative Albright, I take your point there about our republic. I just want to remind you that our republic was founded on some very basic words, and I memorized a few of them. We mutually pledged to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So we're in this together, right? Thank you.
Mr. Gerber, could you come to the table?
Yeah, please. Mr. Gerber, in your testimony, you referred to a statistical interpretation difference. I'm not quite sure what it was, and I just wanted to ask that between yourself and Representative Winkler, and you referred to different university settings, and I'll just give you my old Bemidji State University setting here, but was your reference to the difference in statistics and interpretations that you're talking about a parametric versus a non-parametric statistical relationship, or can you inform me more on that?
Well done. Mr. Gerber.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ben Gerber. I represent the Chamber of Commerce. I think my point is that the way that all these studies have been presented, and I think Representative Uglum, I think, had an interesting point, too, about there are studies that show that there's a small, increase in economic activity, but actually that University of Chicago study that showed that also showed that it was mostly on debt finance purchases. It wasn't actually, and so, we also, I'm seeing some of the bills that are introduced going after, businesses that offer debt financing. So, I think it's an interesting conversation to have. But to answer your question, I think it was more of a joke to Representative Winkler, and we've had our differences over this, and I've enjoyed having this conversation in many different committees.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. I take your point in lightheartedness, and mine was a little bit that way too, if you may get that.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just interested, and I don't know, we're running out of time here, but maybe we can ask some of the people later, but it wasn't for you specifically. It was for the business owners who came before us and said this would put them out of business or harm them greatly. I wanted to find out if they were, if their employees that they have, some of them, I think one was like 150 employees or something. Do they have benefits, or which of the employees of the company? I think, Ms. Linder, you have quite a few employees. Which of the employees of your company have benefits that go with their wages? Can you answer that? And I guess I'm interested, Mr. Chairman, if we don't have enough time to hear from her, also which of the people who, the servers that they were talking, which of them receive benefits from their employees? So do their wages include benefits, or don't they? That's what I'm interested in.
We don't have much time here. I know Hague Companies provides benefits, as he spoke to. Could the servers, did you get benefits? This is a yes or no?
Oh, no, I do not.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if the...
And Ms. Linder? Okay. So, did you have another question, Karen?
No, I'm just thinking, when we talk about wages, some of them include benefits in their package, some of them don't, and it really makes a difference in the ability of the person. Sometimes we find out that our wage earners they're on public assistance for their family in terms of housing, food, or most often health care. So I was wondering if the health care benefits are included in any of the companies that are talking to us, or are we paying for it publicly?
I know that the largest health provider for Walmart is public assistance, so.
I do know that.
Having said that, now we are at the point where we need to vote, because we need to be out of here at 2 o'clock.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like a roll call on this vote.
I figured that was coming, so that's why I cut it off 3 minutes and a second. Did you have any closing comments, Representative Winkler, for 15 seconds?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just ask you for your vote. I appreciate the discussion, and I remain open for any constructive suggestions on how to make this bill better. If anyone has language to bring, I'm certainly open to considering that. And we've had 4.5 hours of hearings on this already, so I hope nobody feels rushed.
That's not including the 6 over in the Senate, is it?
Yeah.
Will you take the roll?
Chair Mahoney.
Aye.
Representative Purcell.
Aye.
Representative Gunther.
No.
Representative Albright.
No.
Representative Clark.
Yes.
Representative Fabian.
No.
Representative Isaacson.
All day.
Representative Kiefer.
Aye.
No. No. Representative Leidiger.
No.
Representative Lomer.
No.
Representative Metsa.
Yes.
Representative Mullery.
Aye.
Representative Newton.
Yes.
Representative Norton. Representative Savick.
Yes.
Representative Ulam.
No.
Representative Ward.
Yes.
Representative Winkler, your bill passes to the Committee on Commerce by a 9-7 vote. Thank you. Members, we stand adjourned.